Today I am sharing this interesting video in which I also learned few things. A sneaky capsular tag. This is an individual who is a male about 62 years in age who has significant nuclear cataract. With this is the fundus, and we are proceeding for cataract surgery using phacoemulsification through a clear corneal incision. The site of incision has been marked at the steep axis and going ahead and marking the primary incision before proceeding for surgery. Putting some intracameral lignocaine, this is 0.5% lignocaine, which will anesthetize the anterior chamber contents. Putting in 2% methylcellulose, inflating the chamber, and proceeding for capsulorhexis. I prefer to use a capsulorhexis forceps itself to create the flap and to propagate the rhexis. So I am proceeding with that, and the crux of the problem starts here, where I presume that the rhexis has been completed by swinging off the capsule in a routine way, but forgetting that it was not really torn off from its base. So here now we have a capsular tag, which is basically a large flap of the anterior capsule which is still attached at the subincisional area to the peripheral rim of the capsulorhexis. So we are not yet aware of that, just like I was not aware during the surgery, and proceeding for a phacoemulsification. It is not a very difficult nucleus to emulsify, grade 2 to grade 3. So primary crack has been achieved using horizontal chop technique, rotating the nucleus and proceeding for cracking it further, making it total 3 pieces, consuming the piece which is proximal to the tip and emulsifying it using phaco mode 2. So this may be a strategy for nucleus which are not very large and bulky, that pieces can be emulsified as they are being created. The half of the nucleus has been left behind, which is being rotated into position, and now being cracked into 2, and further this is being consumed. So one can actually crack the nuclei into 4 pieces using the phaco 1 or a segmentation mode, and then emulsify them separately, or else it can be a situation where you keep on cracking them as they come to you and consuming them each piece as it is presented to the tip. Removing the epinucleus, and during whole of this time we can appreciate, as I had been aware later on, that there was a capsular tag which was all the time in the subincisional area flailing away or into the wound, but not being noticed at all. So removing the cortical matter, this must have been the step where the capsulorhexis tag could have been identified, but I think it was either stuck into the wound, so it was just not visible to me, so I didn't pay any attention or expected anything like that to be left behind. Peeling away the cortex lying on the posterior capsule, and now we can see the cortical cleanup is nearly complete. The bag is very clear and the glow is very uniform, telling us that everything is fine. Now just to remind you that the subincisional area, the capsulorhexis tag is still floating and probably inspissated in the primary incision. Proceeding for implantation of hydrophobic monofocal IOL. And still there is no clue to the operating surgeon that there is a capsular tag which is still attached to the rhexis border. The IOL has gone into the bag. Moving on to removing the viscoelastic, and while this step was being done, I realized the floating anterior capsular tag here, and it was a large tag which was part of the incomplete rhexis, and this is where I realized that the capsular rhexis is still not completed. So I went ahead and to trim that flap away from the rest of the rhexis border, I used a dialer to flatten it out and pull it over the anterior surface of the IOL, and here we can see this capsular tag. Went ahead to trim it using the 1/2 scissor, but because the chamber was not stable, so I couldn't do it, so decided to use and fill up the anterior chamber with viscoelastic so as to have space to work around and stability. Zooming in and then cutting this flap and using the irrigation aspiration cannula to aspirate out the floating flap and also the viscoelastic gel, and now we have finished the surgery. So it all appears so well now, hydrating the wound and sealing the anterior chamber. But the next day there's a surprise, and we have a capsular tag which is pulling the pupil to one side. This is day 3 where still the tug is there. So this was posted onto one of the forums, and we decided to do it either by using a surgical method, removing the entangled flap from the wound, but there were suggestions that this could be easily achieved using a YAG laser. So we proceeded to do this YAG laser, and it was just one single shot was needed, and this capsule connecting from the wound to the iris border was trimmed away, and immediately the pupil became round. So this is the final picture just after the YAG laser has been done. So the lessons which I learned there was that you have to confirm that the rhexis has to be completed. Any floating tag, if it is trimmed, still it is to be made sure that it is removed away from the wound. And finally, if you have this kind of situation, then it can be managed by using YAG laser. Thank you.